it wasn't what I wanted. Go back to this book. I really feel like hello people of the YouTube world and all who's watching this. I'm Mackenzie 901K, and in today's video we're going to be talking about every single book that I've read so far in 2022. This video, it's going to be simplified. I'm not really going to go into each series in detail because I feel like that takes up way too much time. So we're just going to be talking about each book, what I liked about it, what I didn't like, and if I want to tell you guys a little bit more, I will. Probably for the books that I loved, I will tell you all a little bit more, and I will also talk about the books I've DNF'd, my least favorite reads of the year, all of that fun stuff. Okay, so starting off first, we're going to talk about the books that I read in the beginning of January. Honestly, January feels like a completely different time. Right now, as I'm filming this video, it is August. In the beginning of January, I was kind of carrying over some books that I read in December. The first book that I'm going to talk about is The Inheritance Game by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I actually DNF'd this book in the beginning of January. We're not starting this video off strong. This is a very well-loved book by Book Talk, and I don't know really a person that doesn't like this book. I'm not saying that I DNF'd it because I didn't like it. I DNF'd it because it wasn't what I wanted at the time. I just had got back into reading. I quit reading at the end of last year, but I have since then picked it back up, and I've been reading it here and there because I'm excited for the third book to come out at the end of this month. The next book that I read, carrying it over into January, The Spanish Love Deception. It wasn't really like something that I had really planned on picking up, planned on reading, but I did pick it up because I had seen some TikToks about it, and it was on Kindle Unlimited at the time. I don't know if it's on Kindle Unlimited anymore or not. I started reading it. We were in Tennessee. We were getting ready to do look at a light show. I can't tell you why I DNF'd this one either. I just really think it wasn't doing it for me. I hope to pick this book back up. I don't know if I'll pick it back up this year or not, but who knows. The next book that I have is Addicted to You by Christina and Becca Ricci. I love this book. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The only reason I gave it 4 out of 5 is because it's a book that I think of often, but I think this series can get better as it goes along. If you don't know about the Addicted series, it's a 10-book series. I'll pop the list over here. It's a 10-book series that talks about the Calloway sisters and their love lives and their family life, and it's a found family with different types of tropes with the relationships. I have not read the rest of the series. I own the first 3 books. I want to pick this up in the winter time because I do want to start reading a longer series. So hopefully I will pick this series back up this year. I did finish this book and I did like it, so hopefully I can get back into it. The next books are going to be my disappointments of the year, I think. I really don't think there's another book here that really disappointed me as much as this series did. That's the Shadow and Bone Trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. I did actually try to do a reading vlog over this series when I read it, but I hate that video. I hate that time in my life, and I really think that video really represents me going through a really hard time. But I really love the show, and this whole series I'm gonna give like a 3.5. Talking about each book individually real quick, the Shadow and Bone book was really good. I did really like it, but I really feel like if they just added like 100 more pages, I feel like this series could have just ended with one book, because there was only a couple of things that were left unsaid and undone. I don't really feel like we needed other 2 books. So this book I really liked. This was not my favorite book of the series. I think I gave this book like a 3.5 to 4 star rating at that time. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Siegen Storm. This was my least favorite. This book put me in the worst reading slump I think I have ever been in my life. I got about halfway through this book and I said enough is enough. I cannot. I just want to skip this book, throw it out the door, give it negative star rating. I actually gave it a 3 start writing in the end, which shocked me, but the last 100 pages of this book is really, really good. It really sets up the last book, which is Ruin and Rising. Ruin and Rising was my favorite book of the series. I got done with it in a day. It was so fast paced. I gave this book 4 stars. This is my favorite book out of the whole series. It topped the first book for me. Do I still recommend this series though? Absolutely, because I think you should read this series before you watch the show, and you should also read the Six of Crows Duology. This show is so good, and if you don't know, the show combines the Six of Crows book and combines the first Shadow and Bone book. With that being said, I DNF the book. I actually go back to this book later in the year and I try to pick it up again and I just DNF it again, and I really feel like you have to commit to reading this book. I did try to read it and I do still want to read it. I didn't even get past the first couple of chapters, and I think it was because I really wanted to get out of the Grishaverse for a little while, because I'd been in the Grishaverse pretty much this whole second half of January, and I had got sick with COVID after I read the Grishaverse, and I just really did not have the brain power or the motivation to pick up Six of Crows. So the next book I decided to pick up in February, this starts what I read in February, is Defy the Night by Bridge Kimmer. I cannot say people's names at all, so excuse me if I pronounce somebody's name wrong. This book I started reading right as I got COVID, and if you guys don't know what this book is about a fever that like takes over this country or this town or something. It's pretty much like a Robin Hood retelling, where the main girl Tessa is like Robin Hood. She steals like the medicine and gives it to the poor. So I DNF'd this one because I was sick. Now, I know the second book, this is a duology, the second book is coming out in November? I don't know when for sure it's coming out, but I do know that it's coming out, and I do know that I'm going to try to read it before then. The next book that I read, it was a reread. It was Daughter of a Pirate King by Tracy Levensetter. This book is the book that got me back into reading. I really needed some type of upbeat book, and this book does it for me every time. This book is so good. 5 out of 5 stars. I love this book. I actually brought the second one along. I didn't read the second one in February, but I did bring it along just to tell you guys about this duology. I love it. I will never stop recommending this duology to people. They're such short books. They're less than 350 pages a piece, I think, and they're so fast paced. When you start this book, you start writing the action, and it kind of tells the story as it's going along. Like, it tells the background that you need as it's going along. This book really quick follows Alosa. She's the daughter of a pirate king. She gets held captive on some rival pirate ships. Turns out she wanted to get captured. She might be falling in love with one of her captors. It's a really good read. Enemies to Lovers. The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. Now, when I first got this book, it was taking over Book Talk in January, February, and people were raving about this book, and then the second book, that's like Terms and Conditions, I think. I started this book, I got pretty far into this book, but then I started The Selection by Kiera Cass. And The Selection, it's such a good series, but I wound up DNFing this book because these two vibes are so different. This is like cotton candy, and this is like very sad and very adult. I don't hate this book. I want to read it. I don't know when I'm going to. Now, this series is so good. I did not like this series as like a preteen teenager, and that's who it's geared for, but I loved it. The Selection is the first book, and then The Elite is the second book, and then The One is the final book. This is like The Bachelor. If you guys have ever watched The Bachelor, 35 girls are competing to be Maxon's wife. I recommend this series. It's really fast, really easy, light and fluffy. Candy for the brain, as Haley Pham says.
They're all vibes. You know, no brain power, just candy.
I love it. It's so good. Next, after this Selection, since I was in kind of a dystopian phase, I wanted to read The Hunger Games. I didn't like The Hunger Games when I was a kid. I still don't like The Hunger Games. I gave it like 3 out of 5 stars. I just didn't like it. The Hunger Games just, it's not for me. Sorry to those people who are like Hunger Games forever. I've never watched the movies. I'm probably gonna watch the movies at some point. The next book that I read is The Cruel Prince. I could not have picked a better time to read The Cruel Prince. The Cruel Prince, for me, I think there's some weather changes and some season changes as the story goes along, but to me it was just the definition of springtime. And I read this in March, and I went on a trip to Tennessee and I started on this book, and it was just the vibes. Like, let me show you the chapters. It's beautiful. Like, the art in this book is just unmatched. That's why I liked it so much, is because it was springtime. It was pretty. It was what I needed and wanted it to be. And it's so good. I love this whole series. I give this whole series 4.5 stars. The only thing that I didn't like about this series was the romance. And that's what a lot of people like to portray this book series to be, is a romance series. And it is, but it also isn't. The romance is really the side plot as you can get a side plot to be. That's the romance in this series. So don't go into it thinking that it's romance heavy. The last book is probably the most romance heavy out of all 3. The first book I gave 4 stars, and the next 2 books I gave 4.5 stars. This is such a good series, and I recommend you reading it if you want to get into the Fae world. Like, if you want to get into A Court of Thorns and Roses, the Fae universe. I think this is a really good introduction series because it's not super duper long, and it does start talking about like the Fae politics and that sort of thing. I love this series. Holly Black is such a good author. The next trilogy that I read, I was really on my trilogy grind at the beginning of the year. I've read the Renegades Trilogy. This series, it just makes me so happy to think about this trilogy. I love this trilogy so much. I would give this trilogy 4.9 stars, 4.9999 across the board, okay? It is so good. The only thing I hated about it was they took forever to get through. The rest of March and even into some of April, I was trying so hard to finish this series, but I was enjoying my time. There's a bunch of downtime in these books though, so listening to the audiobook, each chapter is read in a different person's voice. It's split up between 2 people. Some chapters are read as Nova's perspective. Adrian's part was also really good. I think that Marissa Mayer is such a good author. I want to read her Lunar Chronicles so bad, but I'm so scared they're not going to be as good as this series. This is my favorite series that I read this year, or at least in the first part of the year. I still think about this trilogy to this day, and I really want to pick it back up again and read it, but these books are so big and they take so much time to read. The first book really danced around the plot a bunch, and from what I can remember, there was a lot of dead time between like the battle scenes, and it's really world building heavy, and the relationship in this book is more prominent in the second 2 books rather than in this book, but it's a really good first book, and it really sets up the world so that way the next 2 books are not as world focused. They're more plot focused. The next book that I read is Sorcery of Thorns. I read this after I was right in the middle of reading the Cruel Prince trilogy, and I wanted something fun to read in the middle, and I thought this was going to be something fun. It was a very dark story. When I first heard about this book, I thought it was going to be really light and fluffy and fun. No, it's a very dark story. The way that this book was described to me is that it's about a girl named Elizabeth. She lives lives in a magical library, and I thought that was what it was going to be about. It's just the magical library, which it is, but it's also so much more than that. The love interest is really good, felt really dark, and it just had the vibes of being a really dark book. But I did end up giving this book, at the time I gave it like a 3-star, but now looking back on it, I do think about this book sometimes. I would give it a 4. I do like this book a lot. I do want to try to reread it. I haven't actually ever opened this copy. I got it from my library, and then I was like, okay, it's kind of good, we'll buy it. So I bought it, and I do want to read it again because honestly I just wanted to get through it, to just get through a book and say that I was getting through a book, because in between reading the Renegades Trilogy and Cruel Prince Trilogy, I was ready to do something else. So the next 2 books I didn't grab. They're over there on my shelf, and I don't really want to go get them, so we'll just pop up a picture here because I'm afraid my camera's gonna fall because my camera's sitting on my bed. So the next book that I read was Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. That book was my 5-star read for that month. I love that book. Even though it was 600 pages, it took me 6 hours to read. I was flying through that book. It was unimaginably good. I'm not really a big romance reader, but wow, that was such a good story, and I really love it. The love interest, he was so good. One of the tropes in it is Grumpy Sunshine, and I'd never really read a Grumpy Sunshine book before that one, and I just wanted to read more Grumpy Sunshine books. So after that book, since I loved it so much, I gave it 5 stars. I read Throttled by Lauren Asher, sort of, and I DNF'd Twisted Love because I don't know, that book just put me in the worst romance slump ever. It was so good that I wanted more books to be like it, and then when Twisted Love and Throttled were not like it at all, I just didn't want it. Not saying that those books aren't good, because I don't know, I haven't finished them. I gave up on it. I was just like, another time, another day, we'll put those away. And I did drop everything to read Legendborn. Legendborn was a wild card. It's a King Arthur retelling. I had never read any type of King Arthur retelling before. The audiobook was so long. It was like 20 something hours, I feel like, or close to it. It was really good, and I cannot wait for November for the second one to come out. This book done tons of world building. That's pretty much what this whole book was about, except for I'd say maybe the last 25%. The last 25% is a lot of action and a lot of fun. There's a love triangle in this, sort of, kind of. The funny thing is that the love triangle, I cannot pick between the boys. Like, I love them both so much. This really ignited a love triangle thing for me, because the next few books that I'm going to talk about, besides 2 of them, are going to be love triangles. I give this book 4 out of 5 stars. I cannot wait to read the second one in November. The next books that I'm going to talk about is the Summer I Turned Pretty Trilogy by Jenny Han. This was the first time I'd ever read the Summer I Turned Pretty Trilogy, because I had actually never heard of the Summer I Turned Pretty Trilogy until I joined Book Talk. Did read To All the Boys I've Loved Before, that trilogy back in the day when those movies were like really big, but I decided to pick up the Summer I Turned Pretty Trilogy, and I loved it. I would give this whole trilogy about a 4.5 star rating. The first book being my favorite, and the last 2 books were kind of meh. The last book in particular was my least favorite. I'm just so sad that this beautiful, wonderful summer vibes trilogy ended the way it did. But I am Team Conrad, so if that says anything, the vibes were immaculate. The show is so much better than the books, in my opinion. If you have not watched The Summer I Turned Pretty yet, watch it before the season changes. Watch it before summer is officially fully over. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Ace of Spades. I got 75% of the way through it, and I just could not finish it. I just did not like it. The way that it was described as Get Out meets Gossip Girl. And did it give both of those vibes? Yes, but it's a thriller. I feel like it could have been more than what it was. Part of it was just a fiction book. I just didn't like it. I feel like it could have been more on the thriller side, but I might pick it up again in the fall. Maybe pick up some of those thriller vibes again. We'll see. The next book that I read after that was The Unhoneymooners. Book talk in the middle of the summer was really invested in summer reads. I do still have 2 summer reads that I want to try to read before this summer's over. I want to still try to read Every Summer After and My Killer Vacation. Maybe My Killer Vacation will be a good transition into the fall. The Unhoneymooners was a really good book. It got me out of a slump. I finished it in one day. It was really funny. I really liked it. I gave it 4.75 out of 5 stars. It was good. It was funny. It was entertaining. The romance was good. I think I'm gonna love in Other Words because I like this book so much. And Christina and Lauren, they're very talented authors. Next on my list is These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan. I've seen a girl on here say that this book was a really bad book, and I've also seen some other TikToks that were saying this book was really bad because they compare it with The Cruel Prince and A Court of Thorns and Roses. And I finished The Cruel Prince trilogy, but I started A Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm about 100 pages in. I love this book. I gave this book 4.75 out of 5 stars. This was such a good book. The world was really good. The world felt really immersive, like the Cruel Prince world. I got into this book and I was listening to the audiobook for this book and I just did not want to put it down. As far as the comparison between The Cruel Prince and A Court of Thorns and Roses, I see it. It was so good that it put me in a reading slump for the rest of the month of June. So when this book came out in July, it was the first book that I ever wanted to pick up again. This duology is another 5-star duology. The first book was good. The second book was even better. Bree's character arc, her story, her character development, oh my god. Her short hair, I had to go cut my hair short right after I read this book. No, this book is so powerful. I hadn't felt this much of a I need to finish this book right here right now feeling since I've read like The Cruel Prince or Renegades or even A Daughter of a Pirate King. It was really good. There's this girl that I follow on Instagram. Her name is Hallie, and Hallie has a bookish shop where she bases her clothing and stuff on bookish things. So her big obsession over the summertime was Percy Jackson. So she convinced me to finally pick up Percy Jackson and read it. And I'm so glad she did. I damaged my spines on my Percy Jackson book. I didn't mean to damage my spines. I'm so upset about this too because the spines are beautiful, first of all. The book set was on sale at Walmart, so I decided to pick it up and I got all 5 books for like $14, which is like a steal. That's like less than $2 a book. So I read the first one and I was hooked. This book series just feels like I picture things when I read. So I was picturing like a cartoon of Percy Jackson just the whole time, and it just felt like a hug, and I love it. And I love the friendship in this book. This one I gave 4 stars. The Sea of Monsters is not my favorite. I give it like 3.5. It's not my favorite. And now I'm on the Titan's Curse. I'm actually currently reading the Titan's Curse. I just started it last night and I'm enjoying it so far. And the last book that I'm going to talk about, I've been trying to get through it for a little bit now, and that is The Prison Healer by Lynette. Noni. I can tell you right now that I am over 75% of the way through this book, and I'm going to give this book like a 4.5 star rating. This girl is really different than any of the other books that I've read. She does not want to be in the light of things. She is not like Alosa would be, but she is trying her best for a child that she was supposed to take care of, Tip. She's trying her best for him. There's a little bit of a romance getting ready to start, I feel like, and I cannot wait to see where that goes because I do like him a lot. So, with that being said, that is every single book that I've read so far in 2022. Like I said, next week's video, we're going to talk about some books that I think that you should read in the fall, and I'm also going to talk about some books that I'm excited to read. We're going to talk about some upcoming releases in the fall. It's going to be a very fall-centered video. Yeah, I'm really excited for the rest of the year, and reading in the fall just sounds better than reading in the summertime, like the fall vibes. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Stay tuned for next week's video when we talk about all the fun fall books. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and click that little notification bell so you will get notified every time that I post a new video. And with that being said, bye guys! Love you!
Know that you're coming back home in the